Alrighty, well, I think we are live. So you've got Tim Styling here, the Manager of Product Marketing from ConnectALL. And with me, we've got Doug, the Enterprise Solutions Architect. So how are you doing today, Doug? I think it's morning for you, right?
Doing good here on the West Coast.
Yep, well, I'm here on the East Coast, repping the post-lunch folks. So excited to dive on in and talk to you guys a little bit about DevSecOps. So let me see if I can share my screen. Alrighty, so today, this tech webinar is going to be all about DevSecOps and how we can use metrics to not only make our code more secure, but through making our code more secure, keep our organizations from being open to cyber attacks and vulnerabilities and other nasty things that we want no part of. So as we take a look at today's agenda, for those that either want a refresher or may not be 100% familiar with DevSecOps, we'll do a high-level overview of what it is and why it's important. We'll then walk through some of the ideas behind measurement, why that matters in the context of DevSecOps, and then speak through some example metrics that are going to be useful to consider. And then finally, Doug and I will do a walkthrough of the ConnectALL platform and show you how the different pieces can all work together to give you a holistic picture of what's going on in your development environment, operations environment, and security to give the holistic overall DevSecOps picture. So for starters, what is DevOps? Well, for those who may or may not be familiar with the idea of DevOps, so DevOps is this idea of connecting and really just collaborating between development and operations in order to create a continuous delivery cycle so that the deployment process can be shortened and both the development and operations organizations can deliver and deploy and operate and code at the highest and fastest rate possible. Now, as we take a look at each of these steps, there's one thing that very clearly is missing, and that kind of created this latest movement, and that's security. So as you look at the idea of DevOps, and if all the organization is focused on is increasing the flow and delivering at a higher velocity, that leaves a large gap and the opportunity for high risk within your organization. And so as we think about DevSecOps, it's not necessarily as simple as tacking on another circle to the idea of DevOps. Security and maintaining security and considering security needs to be done at every single stage of the DevOps pipeline. So therefore, as we think about continuous delivery, security needs to be everyone's responsibility. And in that, security also needs to assist in the DevOps goals of increasing velocity and reaching continuous delivery. So why does this matter? Well, there's one of two ways that things can go if security is not considered in the DevOps lifecycle. The first option is that security could become a bottleneck. And while it certainly is important to consider the vulnerabilities, if security is siloed and if security kind of serves as a bottleneck or a blocker when it comes to developing at speed, then that's going to cause the organization to miss out on all of their DevOps goals and being able to reach the velocity and the speed that they need to reach in order to be competitive. The flip side is not much better. And as we think about continuous delivery without addressing risk, you may have the greatest velocity in the world. You may be doing deployments 3 or 4 times a day. But if you're not addressing risk and if you're ignoring the implications of the security side of the organization, then that leaves the company open for major issues, and it leaves your customers vulnerable, it leaves your employees vulnerable, and it leaves your company's reputation vulnerable. So that's why it's so important to meet in the middle. Security and DevOps are not against each other. Rather, in a DevSecOps environment, they work together to not only enable continuous delivery, but to enable secure continuous delivery. So as we think about metrics within DevSecOps, why does it matter? What's the point? What do we get out of leveraging metrics in this environment? Well, the first piece is visibility. And as we think about what metrics do and what this data can reveal to us, one of the biggest value adds is just being able to see things. If we don't measure it, then we can't manage it. I believe it was Peter Drucker that said that, or at least it's attributed to him. But the idea is very sound. If we're not measuring it, then we can't see it and we can't manage it. Measurement also provides accountability throughout the DevSecOps lifecycle. So as you think about this accountability, what this does, being able to measure DevSecOps metrics and not simply siloing DevOps metrics and security metrics, when you see these together and when you mesh them together, it makes security accountable for delivery speed. Likewise, it makes developers and operations accountable for security. And therefore, you kind of see that shared responsibility. And in that shared responsibility, both sides can better support each other and ultimately lead to improvement. Now, as we think about improvement, there's no way to know if what we're doing is effective. If we change what we're doing, if we implement what we believe to be an optimization of our software delivery lifecycle, if we're not measuring it and have nothing to compare it to, then we don't know if it helped us, hurt us, or we just spent a bunch of money on something that has no impact. Now, some example metrics for us to consider. Here on the left-hand side, we have DevOps metrics. So these are metrics like the flow metrics, where you're able to track the velocity, the DORA metrics, the progress tracking, so seeing how far along you are in your initiatives, your epics, your stories, and then financial metrics to see if you're on budget. Now, alongside those, I've listed some security metrics. So you want to be able to track not only how many vulnerabilities you have in your system and when they're popping up, but you also want to know how severe they are. Are these low severity things that may or may not be worth the time to fix, or are they critical and something that must be addressed no matter how long it takes before we roll out the deployment? And what's our progress as far as resolving some of these vulnerabilities? Are we doing this on time, or is this what's causing us to be so delayed? And how long is it taking us to be able to patch our systems? And that in turn can help us understand, is it worth taking the time to fix those vulnerabilities depending on the severity? Now, as we think about the DevOps metrics and the security metrics, we now need to figure out what's the best way to join them together, to marry them together, and to think about how they can support each other and how looking at security can make DevOps teams more effective and vice versa. So in that vein, Doug and I are going to walk through a quick example scenario. And in this, instead of being the manager of product marketing, I'm going to be serving as our VP of applications. And Doug here, instead of being the enterprise security architect, he'll be serving as a security team lead. Now, Doug and I have a bit of a problem. Now, before we embrace this idea of DevSecOps, our internal teams were very siloed. I had my metrics, he had his metrics. I had my goals, he had his goals. I had my objectives and focus areas and tools, and he had his. And we were both just getting frustrated and ready to pull our own hair out. I was frustrated because we were not meeting our DevOps goals. We were moving very slowly. We were not deploying at a fast enough rate to be able to keep up with our competitors. So that had me frustrated. Doug was also very frustrated because in my zeal trying to increase our velocity, I wasn't thinking as much about risk as I should have been. And as I wasn't thinking about this idea of risk, it was leaving our company open to a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of risk. So what's the solution? The first thing that Doug and I need to do with our teams is bust the silos. And that is done by embracing a DevSecOps mentality. And in doing so, we can share the load. Again, I can be responsible for Doug's security goals, and Doug can be responsible for my deployment goals. And we can work together as a team to solve the problem. Now, in order to do that, we need to have end-to-end traceability. So I can't just be measuring and looking at what's happening in my development environment, just like Doug can't just be focused on what's happening in his security environment. We need to work together. So in order to work together, we've got some needs. The first thing we need to do is be able to consolidate our data and have one source of truth for us to be focused on. We need to make sure that our software and our security tool chains are connected so that I'm not holding him up and vice versa. We can see the flow together. And then finally, we need accurate and relevant measurements to make this work. So how does ConnectALL help with this? Well, the first thing that Doug and I do when we get into ConnectALL is we spend some time together walking through our value stream. And if you haven't seen this before, this is our value stream designer. Now in the value stream designer, what you see that Doug and I have done is we've mapped out our entire software delivery lifecycle from beginning to end. We start with the planning. So where does the idea of a feature or an enhancement to our code begin? From there, we move into development. So how are we building it? What are those tools that my team is using in order to code and develop the software? And what exactly is the function of all of those tools and how are they connected? So you see that here in this center section. Then we move into quality. And you see that in this quality section, that's where Doug and I's experiences really meet, because you see that I've got my team working in Jira, working on the code, testing the code, figuring out what's going on with the code. And then you've got Doug and his security team scanning from two different perspectives. They're scanning the production environment to make sure that everything is working well in the real world and making sure there's nothing that puts us immediately at risk. And likewise, his team is scanning the code before it even goes out and letting us know any vulnerabilities that we can catch beforehand, how we can address them. So this tells a piece of the story. This tells where Doug and I, where our paths meet. But it doesn't give us the whole picture because we still don't have vision into the micro and the macro data that's being collected within this value stream. And so you see down here in the left-hand corner, we've added Insights Analytics, which is a piece of the ConnectALL platform. And we've got data flowing from multiple applications into this one piece of our platform, which is first of all harvested from our tools, organized and consolidated within our common data model, and then displayed in the custom dashboard that we've created here. So the first piece that we're going to look at is the dashboard that's interesting to me as the VP of Applications, the executive view. So I'm taking a holistic view at what's happening in our development environment and how we're doing on our initiatives. So I see here, red flag number 1. We are 30% complete with one of our critical initiatives. And I see here that there's some of our epics that haven't even been started yet. Red flag number 2, we've already gone over budget. That's a problem. And I'm here trying to figure out with my team during our stand-up why this is happening. So as I scroll down and I look at some of the other metrics we've got, this lead time metric really stands out to me. And I can tell my team right now, this is unacceptable. It takes us 2 months for a request to come in to be able to resolve it. That's not okay. And that's not going to enable us to meet our continuous delivery goals. And so originally, before Doug and I started working together and when we were in our silos, I would look at these metrics and I would think, okay, in my value stream, where in the planning stage, the development stage, within all of these different tool combinations, how are we going to address this? How can we cut that lead time down so that we can execute faster and we can reduce costs? However, that gives me an incomplete picture because I didn't consider security. So the next thing that I need to do is I need to navigate over to a security dashboard. And with this security dashboard, I've now invited Doug to a seat at the table. I want my team to know that we are embracing this idea of DevSecOps. We are really looking at how our organization can work and deploy our software in the most effective way. And we can't do that without considering security. So as we consider security, I don't want to put words in Doug's mouth. So I pass things over to Doug during my stand-up, and I say, "So, Doug, why don't you tell us what's going on with these metrics and how it could impact us in development and operations?"
Great. Thank you, Tim. As you were saying, and as we've seen over the years, security used to be relegated to one corner. It was typically ignored during the development process. And then when things rolled out, maybe there were security scanners that would see how secure our system was, or we would be looking for specific vulnerabilities at a more manual level. These days, now that we have our tool chains better integrated, now we can see how not only a static view of security like we see on the first line, that's a static view of, it could be a QA environment or it could be a production environment. Exactly how many vulnerabilities we currently have and how severe they are. And that's an important consideration, just as you when you're doing QC and you're doing testing of a product, you might have some tests that are failing, but after analysis, you realize those tests aren't that critical to the final delivery of the product. And security is the same thing. So that static view is an important indicator of how well you're doing and how you might want to focus your efforts to look at the vulnerabilities at a particular level. It's good to see that we our numbers of high and critical are pretty low, and we definitely want to reduce that number even further. But the medium seems like there's a lot of mediums lurking in our code base, and we should be taking a look at what's going on with that. And the other interesting thing about this dashboard is instead of it simply being a piece of software that looks at some lines of code to determine how secure they are. These are security scanners. So what you do is you deploy your application to an environment like your QA environment or your production environment, and it'll be scanning for vulnerabilities as your application runs. So really a more real-time information is available. So that's what the second row here is showing us, is what has been going over time. How long are the different vulnerabilities at the different severity levels? How long are they open, and how long does it take them to get resolved? So that breaks it down on the different severity levels, and the very bottom left shows you actually your resolution time. So that's sort of the metric that Tim was showing you a minute ago about the 8 weeks lead time. This is an equivalent metric in the security world of once a vulnerability has been identified, then how long is it going to take to resolve it? So this is an example dashboard, maybe in your QA environment of what's going on. And it's providing that feedback to your delivery team of, are they focusing adequate adequate effort into the security as it affects their development processes. As we were saying, improvement is a large part of security, so that if we can analyze the data and see why particular areas are not as secure as they should be, then we can use that information to review our processes, maybe review the resources that we're using, like the libraries and other applications that may be introducing the vulnerabilities. So Tim, that's my view from the security perspective.
Great, thanks, Doug. And yeah, that's huge. And I'm sitting over here very happy that I invited Doug to my team stand-up, because what I could learn from this is that a big part of this lead time is impacted by security. So I noticed that the medium severity vulnerabilities are staying open for a very long time. Like, as I take a look at this snapshot in time as an example here on 6/21, so June 21st, I noticed that the medium vulnerability has been open for 9 hours. What that means is that it's been open all day and it's taken a while to be able to take care of. So I know now that a big piece of this flow time is that my team is spending that much effort and that much of their focus on addressing some of these medium level vulnerabilities. So now what Doug and I get to figure out is we have to talk about some of those vulnerabilities. We have to talk about, first of all, why are they medium severity? Second of all, why is it taking us so long to be able to address them? And third, we need to make a call. So is the vulnerability severe enough to warrant taking that much time? And if so, then how do we reduce that? What can we in our applications team do to be able to help your team bring those number of vulnerabilities down? How do we start to address that? And even as we look back,
Well, I don't know if anybody can hear me on the presentation. I seem to have lost Tim's audio. We'll be addressing that technical difficulty as soon as possible. Yeah, it sounds like everybody can hear me okay. I think maybe Tim may have lost his connection. But anyway, as we were saying on the presentation, and we were pretty close to wrapping up, we looked at both the metrics on the DevOps side and also on the security side. So you can see as the security has an impact in the development process, we want to create a feedback loop. And we want to bring that data back into the development cycle and understand maybe there's a particular module within our development application that has the security concerns, or maybe there's just a change in the process where we need to maybe retrain some developers and be able to address those concerns. So that's how ConnectALL can help us understand what those metrics are, give us visibility into the data, and be able to use that to change our processes. With that in mind, that's the end of our presentation. If there's any questions at this time, I'd be glad to address those. I don't see any questions in our chat, but thank you for attending our talk. If you'd like to reach out to us, we're at connectall.com. Be glad to answer your questions, do an evaluation or a demo of the product, and be glad to talk to your enterprise about how we could further improve your DevOps process. So thank you very much for your time today.